What makes the Governor the worst written character in all of the Walking Dead universe? Welcome back to Lost in Games Unscripted, the series where I talk about whatever comes to mind at any given time. And today, that is the Governor from seasons 3 and 4 of the Walking Dead show. Now, when I say he's the worst written character, there's probably a lot of people running up and saying, no, he's not the worst written character. He was so deep and he had so much to him. But there's a couple of specific things that I'm talking about, so let's go ahead and just jump right into it. Now, for those of you who maybe have never seen the show, or maybe it's been a while since you've seen it and maybe you don't remember all of the details about the Governor, we'll do a brief recap. So in season 3, he was introduced as the leader of a community called Woodbury. And we meet him alongside Andrea and Michonne as they are investigating a helicopter crash, and they're sitting there and they're kind of just trying to figure out what's going on. And then this group of men pulls up and they start like stabbing these corpses from this helicopter in the head. And that's when Andrea and Michonne find out a little bit later on that you come back no matter how you die, because their whole thing initially was like, you were stabbing these people in the head. What were you doing? And they thought it was just that they were taking pleasure in it, and it was actually that they were making sure they wouldn't come back, right? And from the get-go, Michonne in particular is very, very cautious. She doesn't trust the Governor. She doesn't trust Woodbury. She thinks that there's something going on behind the scenes. And later on, we'll find out that there is something going on behind the scenes. But where I have a big problem with the writing in general, as an author, I see all of the flaws, I see all of the good parts and the bad parts when it comes to writing for characters and stories and that kind of stuff. I pay very close attention to that. And with me, when I first saw the Governor, when the show first aired, I was like, this is really cool. They've got this guy in here. They've got this community. I like Michonne, didn't really trust them, but I thought maybe it'll pan out through the season. We'll find out in a few episodes or something like that. We'll find out way later that there was something major going on. But instead of that, in the show at least, I'm not 100% sure about the comics because I never got that far in the comics. But I know in the show, within the first, I think it's the episode where we meet him, it might even be, if not the next one, it's real soon after we first meet the Governor, he rolls out the gate with a group of guys and he shows up to where, so the downed helicopter with the soldiers in it, one of them survived. And he gets the location of that guy's buddies and he rolls out and he introduces himself and then just opens fire. And all of his guys around him in the woods open fire and they just slaughter these soldiers. Now, there is a lore reason, there's some behind the scenes kind of stuff for why the Governor is that way. Apparently, from my understanding, is that I think his brother had been killed by the National Guard at some point or something along those lines. Plus, there was the idea of like he didn't want them potentially challenging his authority, right? If they were to come into Woodbury, they might try and push back on his authority because he wanted to be the one in charge. And all of that is fine. The problem that I have is the introduction of him taking that action so early. So it would have been a lot more interesting and a lot more fun, I think, overall for the season, if we as viewers had to have that back and forth that Michonne and Andrea were having. So Andrea, she just wanted a place to live, right? She saw Woodbury as this potential, not necessarily utopia, but an oasis in the desert, right? Woodbury was a community that harkened back to before the zombie apocalypse. People had barbecues and kids playing outside, and they had walls that protected them, and they had the security force that kept everybody safe, right? And Andrea sees this as a respite in all of the stuff that she's gone through. She's been sick. She's been on the road wandering with Michonne for months at this point, up to almost a year. And she just wants a place to feel safe and to rest. Michonne, on the other hand, she likes the idea of the open road. She likes the idea of being out there and doing her own thing and not relying on anybody except for herself. And she's very, very suspicious of any communities and what could be behind the scenes because she doesn't get to see everything, right? And I think if we had been given maybe at least the first half of that season, if not 3/4 of it, playing into this, let the Governor build up slowly. Don't have him killing these soldiers. Because the problem is that introducing that early on, it makes him obviously evil. You cannot say after that incident that, oh yeah, there might be some good in there. Maybe Michonne's just overreacting, because we know right away that Michonne's not overreacting, that she's absolutely right. You know, he sends Merle he sends Merle after Michonne when she leaves. And from Andrea's point of view, it's hard to side with her, right? Because we know all the stuff that's going on in the background. Imagine a scenario where they show up to Woodbury, Andrea and Michonne, and they are given that the first introduction and kind of shown the walls and the outside and the streets. They see the next day where everything's kind of normal as it can be in a zombie apocalypse, right? And Michonne and Andrea are arguing about it, but we don't see the depth with the governor. We don't see him going out and killing the soldiers. We don't see, we don't have Merle going after Michonne. I think Merle going after Michonne maybe was even an exaggeration. I don't think that he really should have done that, or it should have made it look like it was on his own terms, right? Maybe he decided to do it as opposed to the governor kind of hinting, hey, follow her and take her out type of thing, right? So I think, and that would have played off a lot better too, because most people didn't like Merle at first, right? Merle, he winds up redeeming himself in the end, but Merle, ever since we saw him in season 1, he could be seen as the bad guy, and it could be seen as him maybe in the background. I think it would have been a lot more fun, a lot more interesting to think of Merle as the one that's kind of like doing things outside of the governor's. You know, he's the rogue agent, the lone wolf doing things on his own that the governor doesn't know about, right? And then eventually coming back full circle and only finding out about the things that the governor was doing after Michonne kills Penny. Because I think that Michonne killing Penny thing really was a break in the governor's brain, right? It really put him over the edge because he did care about her. He saw her as his daughter. Yes, she was a zombie, and she was kind of, you know, there wasn't really anything going on up there outside of just, we know from the CDC, like it's just the hunger, the wanting to eat, the rage, the anger. There's no personality whatsoever. Everything that was Penny is gone. We know that. But he doesn't see it that way. And I think if we waited until that moment where Michonne kills Penny to then see him snap, because you could even explain him keeping Penny. You could explain the heads of the wall. He does to Andrea when she asks about what the hell is up with all those heads when she finds out about it. And he's like, it's the way that I remind myself what's outside the gate. It's the way that I keep going, right? So there could be an explanation for those. But I think up to that point, we should be given as much as Andrea gets, really. We shouldn't see what's happening. We shouldn't see him going off. We shouldn't see him talking to Merle. We shouldn't see the behind-the-scenes stuff. I get kind of why they did it. But when you're writing villains, those villains need to be... You have two kinds of villains. You have the kind of villain that everybody knows is absolutely evil, 100% across the board, there's no question. And with those villains, there's typically not a lot of moral ambiguity, right? Those villains are evil for the sake of being evil. And then there's the type of villain that's a little more subtle, that's more... they're doing some things that are questionable, but they're not like outright morally wrong given the circumstances. You think of somebody like Thanos from the Avengers, right? Thanos, at least at first... there's a lot of nuance there. There was a lot of, you know, my people were starving. I wanted to make things better. This is the best way to fix things, right? There's a lot of nuance to his character. The governor could have been something like that, but they took that away and they made him an outright pure evil, which I think is doing a disservice for The Walking Dead. Because realistically, in a world like The Walking Dead, you would have a situation where there are a lot of moral questions, a lot of moral gray areas. How do we handle this? How do we do that? Who do we kill? Who do we let live? You know, there's a lot of those kind of situations, and we see some of those in the first couple of seasons. But season 3 rolls around, and some of those moral gray areas, they start to get overlooked, right? The governor could have been very morally gray. We could have had a lot of questions about why is he carrying out the way he's doing? What's right and wrong? Is it okay that he's doing certain things? But instead of that, the writers were just like, Nah, he's going to gun down a whole bunch of soldiers, and we're going to show how blatantly evil he is, right? That, to me, is horrific writing. And I think of all of the villains that have been shown in The Walking Dead, even Negan. He's going to be a fun one to talk about at some point, because Negan was very nuanced. Negan, there was a lot more to his character. He was a bad guy, but he was a bad guy that you could almost understand and kind of root for in certain ways. That's why he got a redemption arc, right? And the governor, they tried to give him a semi-redemption arc, and then they took it away. You know, that was the tail end of the governor in season 4. I liked at first. I was like, oh, cool. They're bringing him up. They're giving him this redemption arc. Everything's, and mind you, this is when I was first watching it, and I hadn't seen the comics. So I didn't know what was coming. I didn't know that he was going to tear down the prison. There was going to be a war there. So I was thinking to myself, okay, they're giving him a redemption. He's going to come back, and maybe he finds the prison at some point again with his new group, and then they all join together, you know, and they can figure out a way. What Rick and Herschel were talking about, you know, we'll figure out a way to work this out. There's other cell blocks. We can help you guys out. We can work together. And I liked that the governor was, in a way, he was still so adamant about, I can't live with this person because he tore down my community. I can't live with Michonne because she killed Penny, that kind of thing. I kind of like that, but I think it went a little bit too far. I would have liked to see him with an actual redemption arc, and maybe see him go as far as to save Michonne's life in the end. You know, come to terms with what happened to Penny, and he had potentially a new wife, potentially a new daughter, surrogate daughter or stepdaughter or whatever. I think it would have been great to see that. You know, have the prison fall through other means, and have the governor wind up actually saving Michonne's life in the end, dying himself as the prison falls. Like, that would have been perfect for that villain. Not every villain needs a redemption arc. Not every villain can be redeemed. But I think characters like the governor or like Negan, who do some awful things in the circumstances, aren't doing them because they enjoy doing awful things. They're doing them to protect people. And in a future video, I'm going to be talking about, I just finished watching season 4 again, going back through it. I'm going to get ready to get into season 5, but there was a group in season 4, the Claim group. I can't remember their name off the top of my head. They're the ones that Daryl ran with for a little while. They were pure evil. They were ones that didn't deserve a redemption arc. The stuff that they did was atrocious. And that's the perfect example of a villain that is a good evil for evil's sake villain. And that's where I think The Walking Dead kind of screwed up with the governor, because there are certain times where that evil for evil's sake makes sense. The Claim group is a perfect example. But when you have a big baddie like the governor or like Negan, there's something to be said there for some nuance to their position, to make them not evil for the sake of evil, but to give them a really solid foundation, a really good reason for doing what they do, and then to give them the chance to redeem themselves for the actions they did. Because the governor and Negan both, neither one of them were evil. They were not evil people. They did some horrible things. And they did those things as a way of survival, as a way to protect other people. And there's a lot of nuanced discussion to be had there from a philosophical standpoint, from a moral and ethical standpoint. What's okay? Where's that line at? And we've talked about that in videos. So that's my thoughts on the governor and the writing. And I wanted to get that out there because I just finished rewatching season 4. Like I said, I was rewatching season 3 last week, and I was like, man, they missed the mark. He could have been so much better. But I want to know what you guys think down in the comments below. Do you agree with me about the governor? Do you think that he maybe got kind of screwed over in the writing? Do you think that maybe he just should have been a smaller villain? Maybe they should have only had him around for a few episodes and kept it a lot shorter, you know? What do you think about that? And are there other villains? What else do you want to hear me talk about? Because I'm going to be doing this series weekly right now. Things have I've gotten really busy with some other things outside of YouTube, and so I don't have as much time to sit down right now and do things like writing scripts and making bigger videos. So I'm going to be doing this once a week for the foreseeable future until things kind of settle down a little bit. But if you want to help out, so if you want to help support the channel and help me to grow in the future, I've got Patreon and channel memberships. You can always join those things, or the access to videos, name on the screen, all that kind of stuff. If you like and subscribe to the video or to the channel, subscribe to the channel, like the video. Those things all go a long way to helping me out to continue to go forward and continue to grow the channel as we go forward. That's all I got for this one. I want to thank you all for watching. Everybody have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you in the next one.